What's up, guys? Coach Frost here. Today, I got to sit down with Mr. John Kurek. John Kurek is Chuck Norris's right-hand man. They teach character through karate. They've had a massive impact on this planet. I think they've taught martial arts to over 120,000 different kids here in the U.S. and are continuing to make this country a better place to be. Ladies and gentlemen, here's John Kurek. You ready to have some fun?
Let's do this.
All right. Every good martial artist needs an intro. Okay?
Got
Are
it.
you ready for this one?
I'm ready.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, people of all ages, step right up, step right up. See the man with a plan. He's number 2 in your playbook, number 1 in your hearts, Mr. John Kurek. Give him a round of applause.
That's hilarious.
Thanks for being here, dude.
Yes, sir.
Well, I want to talk about a lot of stuff with you today. First off, Kickstart Kids, right? Let me see if I can get the stats right. But you've had some like 110, 120,000 kids come through Kickstart Kids program, which is Chuck Norris's program, teaching character through karate to kiddos all across Texas in about 60 different middle schools in Texas. Is that about right?
Yes, sir. Probably 120,000 is probably a good number of people that have graduated our program. We're probably in between 60 to 80 programs, just depending on the year. Sometimes we gain a couple, sometimes we might lose a couple, but we kind of steadfast around 60.
Nice. And it's got started. You want to tell us a little bit about how it got rocking with Mr. Norris?
Absolutely. So I was one of his original instructors that he sent out. There was four of us. There was 3 schools in the Houston area, and there was 1 down in Galveston. And I was living in a little town called Virginia Beach. It's a big Navy town, big Navy and Marine Corps town. And they called me, and Mr. Norris was like, "Hey, you want to be part of a legacy?" And I was like, absolutely.
Well, let me stop you right there. You're the head honcho of Kickstart Kids, everything that happens on the mat. What does it feel like to have the pressure, no pressure, of carrying on Mr. Norris's legacy? He's turning 85 this year, just turned 85. His big birthday celebration is coming up, which, strangely enough, people can go to, which is cool. So there's a giant party at the Post Oak Hotel here in Houston on the 26th.
April 26th.
April 26th. People can actually go to the Kickstart Kids website and buy a table and go to this event, be at Chuck Norris's 85th birthday party, which is pretty cool. All Chuck Norris jokes aside, that's a pretty cool thing to be a part of.
Absolutely, and they can even be part of the VIP group if that's something that they choose to do, and kind of get a picture taken and
hang out with him for a little bit,
kind of talk to him, and kind of shoot the mess with him.
I love it. Do you have a favorite Chuck Norris joke?
You do know this is true. He was pulled over by the police last week.
Uh-oh.
And don't worry about it. He let the police off with a warning. Okay, that was bad.
I like when Chuck Norris jumps into a pool, he doesn't get wet. The pool gets Chuck Norris.
That's it.
That's pretty solid.
The boogeyman hides from Chuck Norris.
What is it?
The boogeyman hides from Chuck Norris.
Oh, I like that one.
Yeah.
You told me one time where him and Superman got into a fight.
Oh, well, they had a competition back and forth, and they said, "Hey, let's fight this out." And the rules were that the winner had to wear their underwear on the outside of their pants.
Love it. Okay, so all Chuck Norris jokes aside,
Yeah.
I mean, you're the guy that's in charge of carrying on Chuck Norris's martial arts legacy.
Man, that's a lot of pressure.
That is a lot of pressure, right?
Yeah. So, and the hardest part is finding the qualified instructors. Luckily, I have an awesome team that helps me. This is just not John, a one-man show. This is a lot of really good, talented people that really have my back. And, they all know we're putting pretty much Chuck Norris's stamp on this individual that we're sending in a public school. So it is a lot of pressure. But I want to think that we have a good training program for our instructors, to set them up to be successful, because we know what's on the line. We're talking legacy here.
Yeah.
Mr. Norris's legacy. And so when you say pressure, I'm like, man, I got my hands, have his legacy. I gotta make sure that we deliver a good product.
Yeah.
So.
Well, one of the cool things, I've only been around him a handful of times, he and his wife, but they're some of the most authentically kind, generous people I've ever been around, especially people with celebrity status. You can really tell that they're the kind of people that wake up every day and go, okay, what can we do to make this world a better place? Who can we help? Anytime they're talking to you, you're the only person in the room, and they're always open and honest, sharing, anything going on with them. And you can just get a real great vibe from them that they're out there to make the world a better place.
I think that's why he was so successful in his series Walker, is because that's who he is. He wants the good guy to win. That is kind of his.
That was his
personality.
role.
That was it. And I don't think he really had to act that much. And as far as she's concerned, she is the very best.
I know.
Like, both of them. They're just.
I know.
It's like, I asked him, because I have an opportunity to have intimate conversations with him. I'm like, hey, sir, why do you do that? I mean, he donates a lot of money to this. He's like, look, John. He goes, I could send my money overseas. I can do that. He goes, but man, the fight's right here in my own backyard with my own kids. And that's why I give my money, to organizations here in the United States.
Yeah, to help the kiddos here.
Yes.
That's pretty solid.
And
yeah.
even her, she was like, John, what is this all for? I mean, and this conversation was probably about 2 weeks ago. What is this all for? If we're not giving back and helping people, what is this for?
Yeah.
And I was like, man, that hit me. For someone that's got, obviously everything that they want, you know, to, have that in their heart to, genuinely want to help people.
Yeah, my wife, after one of the Kickstart Kids event, my wife and I were there talking to Miss Norris, and when we were going to get in the car, she was like, man, I want to be like her when I grow up.
And she's awesome.
She's awesome.
Yes, awesome. So.
Super cool.
Yeah. And so, like we were saying, his personality, he has his own little comical way of, his personality can be kind of funny.
Yeah.
And you don't get that from him, just from his show, but he's a pretty funny guy too.
I love it. And how did the Chuck Norris jokes get started? Is there...
They just came out of nowhere, to be honest with you. I think what happened is there were some college kids that did a report and they started just saying all these jokes, and it just took off, and it hasn't stopped. They still do it today. I mean, it just keeps growing.
There's new ones all the time.
Every day, I'm like, they come out of nowhere.
That's
and
awesome.
then people are like, hey, have you heard, this? Yeah, I haven't heard that one yet, and I've heard all of them probably like 10 times over probably. So.
Well, that's cool. So, okay, back to Kickstart. So people can go to the event. It's boots and cowboy hats and
right.
Nice suits.
It's nice and casual.
Boots and black belts.
Yeah, it kind of fits our theme. He's Walker.
Yeah.
So it's pretty much a, boots, jeans, if you want to. If you don't, you want to come casual.
Yeah.
Business casual, whatever.
And there's a band, I'm guessing.
Drake Mulligan, who's a up and coming country
singer.
Yes.
Is there a birthday cake? Are we singing happy birthday?
I don't know that.
Okay.
Because I'm in charge of the operation stuff.
Right.
I try not
You're
to
not
get
the party planner.
No, I try to stay away from it. I know my lane.
You stay on the mat.
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. Well, that's really cool, and it's cool that they open it up for people to be able to come and experience that, celebrate his birthday, and be a cool benefit for Kickstart.
And it's a really good insight to what we do. So we'll have kids there doing demonstrations. We'll have testimonials talking about what the program does for them. It's kind of like what Elite does. You change lives.
Yeah.
That's what Elite touches lives.
Yeah.
And that's what we do. We do it with a clientele that can't afford probably the monthly tuition that the average Elite customer can probably,
right.
Make sure that, that they do. But, and we started off when we first started in the Houston area, we started in the 4 schools. But they gave us the roughest schools that they could find. So they basically were setting us up to fail. And it had the opposite effect. They put us, we were in the 3rd Ward. We were in schools in Galveston. One of my schools that, I eventually went to was Yates High School. And at the time was, extremely rough. Obviously, I look a little different than everyone else at Yates High School. But it didn't matter because in martial arts, you don't really see color. You see green belt. You see red belt. You see white belt. It just breaks through so many barriers.
Yeah. What are some of the cool, if you can think of 1 or 2 stories about kids that have had, breakthroughs or transformations? I'm sure there's a zillion of them, but any of them jump out at you?
There are, because I think why the Kickstart Kids program is so effective is that it reaches those kids that are not going to make the football team. They're not going to be the all-star on the basketball team. And there's a lot of those types of kids out there. Maybe band's not their thing, but the karate kind of fits their niche. And so they're looking for something. So this is going to be very arrogant of me to say, but a lot of the school shootings, I feel like if they went through a great character education program like Kickstart Kids, I bet we would have a lot less of that.
Yeah, totally.
Just the mental health that a lot of kids are needing. You know, you're looking up to a black belt mentor. You know, a lot of the girls that we have are single family, you know, don't have a father in the household. So when they see this strong black belt, you know, male role model, and they've never had a strong male role model. And it doesn't even have to be a male. Those strong female black belts that I have that are up there, when they get to see like, wow, she did it, maybe I can do this. And it just gives them some hope.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yes.
So, all right, if I'm just thinking, I know about schools and school boards and red tape, and if I was going to go to a school and say, hey, I want to start teaching, you know, martial arts here at this school, I imagine that would be a giant pain in the rear to go through the principal, through the school board, through all the parents to get something like that approved. How did y'all get that going from the beginning?
Well, it's a great question that you're bringing up, a great point. So it is very, very hard. And, you know, Chuck, when I say Chuck, I say Mr. Norris.
Yeah.
But on the podcast, I'm trying to be not as formal. So when Chuck went to, I didn't want a martial artist out there going, he's calling him Chuck.
Yeah.
So I'm going to call him Chuck for right now.
Yeah.
When Chuck went to, you know, he had this idea a long time ago, and he brought it up to the California School Board when he lived in California.
Okay.
And the California School Board basically looked at him like he was crazy and that he's not going to come in here and teach these bad kids how to fight even better.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right. So they missed the whole concept, you know, of what, you know, martial arts is even all about, you know.
Okay.
You know, which is we deal with, you know, I could go on, and I don't want to, but, you know, we deal with fight or flight, because kids fight when they're scared and they run when they're scared. And martial arts kind of instills that confidence and beliefs that there are other ways to figure things out, you know, whether they walk it out, talk it out, find someone else to help them out. So he gets shot down in California, and he just kind of forgets the idea. He's like, oh, okay, guess it's just not going to work. And obviously Walker happens, and through Walker, obviously he's famous at this point.
Yeah.
He gets a phone call from President Bush Sr.
Okay.
And invites him to the White House.
Okay.
So he's sitting there with President Bush Sr. and he's and President Bush is, hey, Chuck, you know, you got money and you got fame, and, you know, what else you want to do? And, you know, so Chuck remembers this idea that he had. And he's like, well, I had this idea. I wanted to start this foundation, and I wanted to teach, you know, the disciplines and philosophy of the martial arts to middle school age children. And President Bush was like, well, why haven't you done that? And he was like, well, I tried to do it. I tried to do it in California, but they told me I was crazy. He goes, well, where would you like to launch this thing? And Chuck was like, well, it doesn't really matter to me. I don't care. And President Bush was like, well, you know, I have some connections in my hometown of Houston. I think I can help you out. Obviously, when the President of the United States is making phone calls for you.
Yeah, that helps.
You know, yeah, so that's basically how we got started in the Houston area, is President Bush.
Nice. And he was a longtime supporter, cheerleader for Kickstart Kids.
Yeah, actually, at one time, I was really amazed with him. And what I mean by that is, at one time, the gala, there was a tennis event that was attached to it. It was the tennis and the gala and tennis event. And basically what they did is they paired a semi-professional or professional tennis player with a celebrity. Okay. We used to have a lot of celebrities come. And obviously, you know, he's President Bush, but he moved. I mean, and he played tennis he was later in his age. I was watch him run the court, and I was like, wow, he's pretty athletic here. And it was funny because I'd ask Mr. Norris, hey, are you ready to play? He was like, I don't know. Hey, I just picked up the racket last week or something. Right. So we'll see how this goes, kind of thing. And but yeah, getting back to President Bush, he was really athletic and really good at tennis. So,
well, cool. All right. So you had the nod from the president to get the thing rolling here in Houston. You got it going in 4 schools, 4 of the hardest schools, and then you had the opposite effect. Rather than teaching bad kids how to fight better, what happened?
Right. So basically, you know, principals would take notice, superintendents would take notice when they're walking the halls and they see a distinct change in their, in the culture of their school. And so what I mean by that is, nowadays for you to hear a kid say yes sir or no sir or yes ma'am or no ma'am, that just doesn't happen. When you walk in a martial arts class, especially a karate class, just traditional karate class,
Yeah.
That's strong. And they're coming in there and they're hearing the kids yes sir, no sir, bringing their materials to class. Now they're passing all their classes now. Now they're graduating. Now you have less teen pregnancy. Now you have less kids skipping school. And so we were followed by a statistician for a lot of years. And, through her findings, they were finding that a kid that goes through our program versus a kid that doesn't go through their program is more likely to graduate, less likely to be in gangs, less likely to be teen pregnant, and it just went on. So we took those results, and principals were like, "I got to have this," and so that's kind of how we've been growing over the years.
Nice. And so you've got programs here in Houston, some in El Paso, some in the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Irving,
Okay.
Carrollton, Georgetown, Pflugerville, Bryan College Station, Navasota, Galveston. We're in every single Fort Bend school, middle school.
Oh, nice.
And that middle school seems to be our niche, and that's kind of what we stay to. And the reason that I say that that's our niche is we are successful with the elementary schools and the high schools, but and the reason we focused on middle school is everything's geared towards the elementary child and everything's geared towards the high school kid, and this is kind of that forgotten stage. But this is the important stage, is this is where they're choosing their friends and they're choosing what paths they are taking right now. So when they go into high school, we're hoping to send them on the right path.
Nice.
So right now we are 60 schools deep. We're in every single Fort Bend middle school that they have. And El Paso is kind of a hot spot for us right now.
Nice. And then I assume it's challenging El Paso to here. You got to have somebody that represents the brand well in the city, right?
Yes.
And then they're sort of in charge of however many middle schools you have going on there.
That's correct. So basically what I did, because like you said, we were talking earlier about, making sure you uphold your standard.
Yeah. Brand consistency, making sure that what's being taught at one school is the same thing that's being taught at another school. You feel like that's a pretty important thing. People just aren't out there teaching their own style.
Right. I did not want to have it watered down. So could I have gone to El Paso and hired someone in El Paso and say, hey, karate guy, go run that? Yes, I probably could have. But what I did was incentive driven, obviously, within people that we already had. I kind of recruited, looking for a leader. Was able to place him. I placed 2 leaders over there, and now we're starting to grow through El Paso
and maintaining the quality that you have
right.
elsewhere too. Yeah, I think that's an important part. A lot of people try to expand in any type of business or nonprofit, and you start to it's a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, ends up not looking like the original after a while.
That's why, and I don't want to switch the podcast and talk to you, but that's why I'm so impressed with Elite. Is that when I look at your different locations. And I'm like, I know we're good, and I think the world of Coach Eric and Coach Spence and Coach Josh. I mean, these guys are awesome. But when I go to your other location, oh, these guys are good too. Go to that look, wow, these guys are good too. It's that standard that you guys have kept up that I have been like really in awe of, and kind of fell in love with jiu-jitsu because of that, because it's not watered down like karate has gotten, and we can kind of go into that whenever. But so keeping the standard up was extremely important to me. I believe in great karate. I believe in that. I believe in karate as a self-defense. Something real viable for students to learn to be able to defend themselves. Now, I'm not saying karate is the end all to be all. I think you have to have other things. I'm smart enough to know that. But to sell the program, getting back to what we're talking about as far as selling the program, I believe great karate you have great karate, everything else will come. The great character is going to come.
I agree. I think karate is the perfect style to be teaching in the schools. You know, you can't go in there and start teaching MMA and wrestling and jiu-jitsu and Thai boxing, and you're going to run people off, and that's an overwhelming amount of information to even just learn one of those. Me trying to learn all of them, but karate. Give us a little bit of a history lesson, if you don't mind, on karate and taekwondo and those striking arts, and what was that, 60s and 70s when those started to become more popular here in the U.S.
Yes, I mean I would say 60s probably started like getting some popular. 70s and 80s you had the kickboxing days, and I actually heard Coach Eric talk about that. When he was talking about the PKA days, and
yeah,
and I did some of that as a teenager, competed kickboxing and stuff. But obviously, when the Gracies got here and they brought a whole new flavor, obviously the jiu-jitsu, but then the Muay Thai influence, and now you have more of an MMA. But at one time, karate was kind of like MMA. You had leg kicks, and you had joint locks, and you had throws. And I think as it got more Americanized, it kind of got watered down a little bit.
Yeah, one of the things I like about Chuck Norris is he has black belts in multiple different styles of martial arts. The first time I met him, I was like, "Hey, I'm a jiu-jitsu guy," and he was like, "Me too," And then we had a whole conversation about jiu-jitsu, and I was relating to him like he was a striking guy, But no, he's got a black belt in judo. I'm guessing karate, taekwondo, and then jiu-jitsu. I think he's 3rd or 4th degree black belt jiu-jitsu.
That's right.
He's actually one of the guys, the cool piece of history that helped the Gracie family get started here in the Machados in California, and then Carlos Machado here in Dallas on the set of Walker. So it's really cool that, if you look at people that have had a major impact in martial arts and other people doing martial arts globally, you've got, people like the Gracie family. You've got Joe Rogan through his podcast today, has a lot of people interested in doing martial arts. We have a lot of people that come in through the door. And what's got you interested in training? Well, I've listened to the podcast and I hear about all the benefits, so I'm going to give it a shot. But if you think about Mr. Norris, him and Bruce Lee in the movies, right, started to make martial arts popular. You had Karate Kid that sort of came out. I'm rocking my Cobra Kai shirt today in honor of the karate conversation.
That's awesome.
So, those guys had a major impact in people just learning about martial arts, and karate became a household name, even to the point where my parents and my granddad, I've been doing jiu-jitsu 10 or 15 years, and my granddad would be like, "Hey, it's my grandson. He does karate." And I'm like, "No, it's jiu-jitsu." And he's like, "It's karate," and it just became the name for martial arts.
Right. It's funny because I started when I was 6 years old. And at the time, it was I'm a little town in Virginia, and it was the largest karate school in the United States at the time. And it was called Chuck Norris Karate Studios.
Wow.
And how that formulated in that little town was he was on the Johnny Carson show. And he was, I don't know if most of your listeners will know who Johnny Carson is, but he was a talk show host back in the day. And he's on this talk show host, and a millionaire sitting in Virginia was watching the show.
Okay.
And he calls Chuck Norris and says, "Hey, my name's Bill Maher."
Not Bill Maher, the...
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay, got
Different Bill Maher. I have the money. He goes, "Maybe we can make a deal." And that's kind of how he had 2 large schools in Virginia, and it was backed by a man by the name of Bill Maher.
Oh, cool.
Yes.
So somebody bankrolled him to get the thing going.
Well, and then, so what would happen was Bill Maher was like, "Look, I'll supply the money, this and that. You supply the instructors." So, and the idea was they were going to go start a chain, two in every location, all around the country.
Yeah.
And so what Mr. Norris did is he sent all his top black belts to go run these couple schools.
Okay.
And so I just happened.
You just happened to be a 6-year-old kid
who walked into this. I mean, it was pretty much in my lap. I mean, and as you know, coaching is everything. If you got great coaches, you're going to probably be a pretty good student. Because I wouldn't say I'm athletic. I'm a worker. I go to work.
Yeah.
But there was kids way more talented than me in that school.
Wow. Okay. So to get some perspective on that, that was, not to date you, but 40, almost 50 years ago. All right. So Mr. Norris was in his 30s. I'm guessing, yeah, he would have been about
85
So
now.
he would have been about 35, 37, somewhere in there. So and he's getting that rolling. And I mean, that's at the peak of his acting career. He was probably just winding up competing, I would assume. I don't know how long he
Yeah.
competed age wise, but
35, I think.
35 or so.
36. Maybe.
Yeah, and he was, multiple time world champion in what were the various styles, were they karate competitions? Were they taekwondo? Both? I mean,
Right. I think the circuit that he would compete in was more of a sport karate type arena. Now, the tournaments were different then than they are now.
yeah,
Now, a lot of people might say it's a game of tag or whatever, and that might be true. It's like what people say with sport jiu-jitsu. It's that's sport jiu-jitsu and this and that. But to me, I'm like, there's still elements of it that you can use for self-defense in my
yeah,
humble opinion. Same with sport karate. Do I think that I'm going to just tag someone and stop in a street fight? No, but I like the speed of it. I like the strategy of it. I like the setups of it. So I'm going to take all that, and it's kind of fun. So I'll play with it because it's fun. But I know how to decipher between what I would use and what I wouldn't use.
yeah.
Same with you're not going to pull spider guard probably in a street fight probably.
Right.
So same kind of thing. But back then it was blood and guts. It was I'm punching to stop you pretty much. And
Yeah, watching some of those old
That's right.
highlights on YouTube
That's
are
right.
pretty cool. I mean, there's some pretty nasty knockouts, and I mean,
Right.
they weren't playing patty cake.
No. Well, and that's I want to be careful when I say this because the karate people are going to be upset with me.
Yeah,
But it's taken a spiral down in quality. Not everywhere. There's still some really good schools out there, and I don't want to sound like, and it's there's none. There are, but there are a lot of belt factories too.
mm-hmm.
It became real commercial. A lot of things have became real commercial, and I say this out of disappointment because I'm a huge believer in karate.
Yeah,
That's the thing is I really do believe in karate, but I don't like what it's been transformed into over the last 10 years or so. I'm actually kind of nervous for jiu-jitsu, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And I don't know as much about jiu-jitsu as you guys. In fact, I say this all the time. I'm 54 years old. I'm by no means ever going to be as good as you or Eric or anything like that. Shoot, if I get half as good as you guys, that's a win for me. you
Right.
know? And in fact, 54, I'm like, am I thinking I'm going to be some all-star? No, but I'm like, you know what? I'm going to turn 60 one day. I might as well accomplish something. I might as well do something with my, with these 10 years. They're going to go by anyways. Let's accomplish something. That's kind of what my.
Well, that's one of the things I really like and appreciate about you is, you've been successful for, 40 something years in other styles of martial arts. And then you decide one day like, hey, you know what? There's this other martial art. It's pretty cool. Let me pour my cup out, go start filling it up with another style. And, now you're a purple belt in jiu-jitsu, which is sort of like the equivalent of a black belt from a traditional martial art as far as time goes. How long have you been training jiu-jitsu now?
6.5
6 or so years. And so I think that's cool that you're the kind of guy that sets new challenges and continues to
But the awesome
challenge yourself.
thing is the marriage of the two to me. It's the striking and the grappling. Like, man, okay, I'm gonna punch you in the face.
Yeah.
And if you do take me down, I feel like I'm good unless Eric gets on top of me. I ain't getting up then. But if it's somebody else, if it's a normal person, let me just put it like that.
Yeah.
I feel good. I'm gonna get up and I'm gonna punch you right back in the face. And then,
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, if I get with a super fast guy and like, man, his hands is just way too fast. I feel good. I can take you down.
Yeah.
So it's that that's really appealing to me. To have the marriage of the two.
Yeah.
So to get back to, I'm afraid jiu-jitsu is going to do the same thing. Is I have a lot of friends around the United States.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I've even told you this, but I've had a black belt of jiu-jitsu black belt call me and ask me about my training. And I was like, oh, it's going good. This, I'm battling these injuries. My hip's jacked up. I need a new hip. I need a hip replacement at the time. I need a new hip. And he was like, well, how's your rank? And I was like, well, man, I'm really happy. I just made my purple belt. I'm working hard. And he was like, well, listen, man, if you ever need rank, I can help you out there. And it just turned my stomach. I was disgusted. Like, I want no part of that. I would rather be a 2-stripe white belt with my career if Eric was like, that's what you are. Then
Yeah.
that's what it is.
Yeah.
I didn't get the talent or whatever. You're a 2-stripe white belt. Then have somebody give me something.
Yeah.
That was horrible to me.
Yeah, that's
So
icky.
that scared me at first. I'm like, man, I hope jujitsu's not doing this. That kind of.
Yeah, I, you know, I agree. I think things have a natural tendency. The more people that are doing it, sort of that quality goes down. So it's up to guys
Yes.
like us to maintain that high level quality when we can. Because back in the day, I mean, to get a black belt in jiu-jitsu in the 90s, or early 2000s, only insane, crazy people were even training, and the programs were set up to, uh, like every student was preparing to go do a fight. I mean,
Mhm.
it was like if you're going to fight one day, that's what this is. And then so only your hard ass tough guys that could hang and battle through the injuries and were mad at the world could survive, right? And then so one of the things that's made us successful here at Elite is creating a program that's palatable for anybody to come in and learn and get better in small doses and not get smothered on day one, and not go back to work with a black eye or a bloody nose, which was common in the early days, right?
Mhm.
And so figuring out a way to feed it to people, like I said, and eating that elephant one bite at a time versus just kicking the tar out of everybody.
Well, that's where I think Elite's really done a great job. Is there's something for everybody here.
Yeah.
There's something for the athlete that wants to be challenged. There's something for the 55-year-old that's trying to stay in shape and have a good community. There's something for the family to be involved with.
Yeah.
And so I think it's done a really good job on reaching out to the different learners, types of people,
Yeah.
to build their community.
Yeah, the different people groups, meeting people where they're at.
That's
and
right.
Like you said, pushing the athlete and the grandma, chilling her out a little bit, but pushing her when we need to. And yeah, I had a good friend of mine. He's in his mid 50s and he just started training like last week. And I'm like, dude, don't get injured. Like, that's your only job. Because he used to be, I think he was a college football player, and he's strong-willed, and he's getting in better shape. I'm like, dude, your only job is to not get injured. And he's like, oh, I want to go do this group class. I'm like, dude, there's a bunch of 20-year-olds in that group class. All right, you need to start with about 10 private lessons. And get through these private lessons, learn how to do the warm-up, right? Learn the basic techniques, get one or two things to do from each position, and then we'll work you into that group class. But let's baby step this thing, because the worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to get injured and then you're never training again. But if we take this first 3 to 6 months of your training and feed it to you slow and make sure you're safe, then after 6 months to a year, you're going to have the tools where you can hang in here with these young guys trying to get after you a little bit.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So okay, I know, right after we first met, we talked about putting the ground component in with the karate program in the middle schools. What was that thought process like? Why did you want to do that, and what has that process been like?
So let me rewind on you.
Okay.
Because I think was asked earlier, how I met you.
Okay.
And so obviously, and I hope this is okay to say,
Yeah.
that Frost, he's on our board right now. So before he was on our board, I got a call from our executive director, and she was like, "Hey, I met some guy named Frost, and he wants to come here to talk to you, and this and that." And in my head, I'm like, "Oh my God, what is it?" Like, I didn't want to waste my time. I'm like, because you know how many people call there, and they're like, "Hey, I know Chuck Norris," and
Oh, really?
And I have to listen to all of this, so I'm like, "What is this
I'm
guy?"
a badass.
I have
you
to.
need to know me.
Oh my goodness!
Really?
I had a call last week. This guy, he wanted to get a hold of Chuck Norris, and he knows Chuck Norris, but Chuck Norris was holding money for him, and
Oh, boy.
he needed to get to his money, and he invented Pringles and peanuts, and I mean, he would not stop, and it was like a 10-minute me just sitting there on the phone listening to him. So when they tell me someone's up in the office and he's a jiu-jitsu guy, and he wants to talk to you, and I'm like,
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. Oh, Jesus.
but that was life-changing for me. I mean, because jiu-jitsu's been great for me because, 45 years doing one art,
Yeah.
this just brought a whole new enlightenment for me. So it was awesome that you came through the door. But at first I was like, oh my God, I got to talk to this guy.
Yeah.
What was the original? Point?
The ground component.
Oh yeah. So, over the years, I'm watching our kids, and some of their striking is really good. The kicks and the punches, and we have to be really careful. We're in middle schools.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about, a middle school kid in school and then someone's getting mounted or back take or whatever, you know, not everyone's like us, and you know they're just pure martial artists, and they're going to be looking at it from a martial arts
Oh,
standpoint.
you're talking about the touching.
Correct.
Yeah. Middle school kid, a boy and a girl in middle school hugging each other
In school.
in school is sort of
Right.
frowned upon. So,
That's right.
So how do you do that
Right.
in a sport?
So
Yeah.
I was like, man, but I saw that it was a hole because it was a hole in my own game. So I was like, man, I would really like to supply our kids with just some basic fundamentals, like, you know, just try to get back up so you can strike again.
Yeah.
And so that's when I approached you and like, hey man, what do you think? And we just kind of had meetings back and forth. What do you think of this? We didn't want to put too much, you know. And obviously, everyone that I've hired, they're all striking black belts. I do have jiu-jitsu guys in there, but you know they're the minority.
Yeah.
And so I have to teach all the black belts this, and then it's one thing to know it, but then to be able to teach it, you know, at the level that,
Yeah.
you know, technical level that I would like them to be able to do it, it took a lot of work. So, but the idea was, okay, I can't really do it in middle school. So I saved it for like when they go on to high school, because we'll run an after school component. I'm like, man, I'm going to put this in part of their black belt levels. So, and it's worked out great. In fact, I don't think I was looked on very highly when I brought it in.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are you doing? This is not what we do. You know, this
By the other black belts?
that's correct.
Okay.
So I'm like, guys, if you lift up the hood of your car and you see that you need a 5/16 socket and wrench or whatever, you know, I'm not a mechanic, but, and all you have is a screwdriver, you know, you don't have the tools that you need in order to be successful. So I'm like, all we're trying to do is you know, provide you with more tools. So at first, it kind of started off like that. I don't think it was very popular, but now I think they're having a lot of fun at it. And I'm actually hearing the same guys that were saying that going, we should have do this earlier.
We should have done this years ago.
What are you doing? So I can't win.
So not to nerd out on martial art details, but what we did when we sat down is we said, hey, your program is built around striking. We don't want to turn your program into a jiu-jitsu program.
That's right.
We just want to give the kids tools to get back up to where they can be successful striking, right? So we created, you know, as simple as, you know, sprawling on a takedown, you know, bicycling to stand up if somebody's on top of you, you know, and created a program around, it has some submissions in it, but mostly getting out of the way if somebody's on top of you and getting up.
Right. Now, the biggest problem for me now is, you know, when we implemented this, I was still a white belt with like 2 stripes.
Yeah.
But now I'm a purple belt with 3 stripes, and I look at things like, I guess, more technical, and I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my God, this is trash, man. What are you doing there? You just return this way. So
Right. And then there's the, well, why stand up? You could just choke the guy from here, you know, and
That's
it's
right.
like, no. We're trying to stand up, get out of the way, avoid multiple attackers.
That's
you know,
right.
Get some teacher help if you need to, you know, teaching some stuff that's going to be successful for these kids in schools.
It's been a great addition, though, and I think the kids are having a lot of fun at it. So it's brought a whole new element. You know, they go on to high school and they've been striking this whole time for, you know, 4 or 5 years. This just brings a whole like new element for them to have fun.
A new challenge too,
That's
I'm
right.
sure, and
That's
introduces them to a new style, which is sort of Chuck Norris's legacy with a black belt in judo and jiu-jitsu and striking and.
Well, you know, he proposed a long time. I mean, ever since he brought the Gracies to Las Vegas.
Yeah.
He has an international tournament that he throws every year.
Yeah.
And it's a seminar and martial arts tournament.
Mm-hmm.
I actually won the tournament 4 years in a row.
Cool.
And when I was a younger dude.
In your younger days?
Yeah, in my younger days. I actually won it. I won it when I was 35. That would have made the 5th time in a row, but that was a senior, so I just don't count that one. And then was like, you should count that one. You still won. I'm like,
love it.
That's hard. It's hard for me to count that one. But he would. He's the one that brought all the Gracies. He had Hickson, Hoyce, Orion. All of them came to do this seminar.
Nice.
And Chuck believed, I say Chuck now.
Yeah.
Chuck believed in grappling for a long time, and he was proposing to all of his black belts that he wanted them to at least get a blue belt.
Yeah.
You know, he didn't make it a mandatory thing, but he pushed every year for everyone to, you know, at least get a blue belt.
Yeah, continue to challenge themselves and grow and try something new and, yeah, learn those ground techniques.
Yeah, and in fact, a lot of people don't know this. I know, you know, Mr. Norris helped the Machados get jump started. So he basically took them down to a shopping center in California. I don't remember what city, town, or whatever, but he showed him a building, and the brothers were like, "Well, yeah, that's nice, but we can't afford this."
Mm-hmm.
And Chuck looked at him and said, "No, I've already paid for it. It's yours."
Yeah.
And gave it to him.
I know. That's so cool.
Right?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, so he literally, that was, I don't know the exact date, but that was probably, if not the first, one of the first 3, retail jiu-jitsu places in the U.S.
Probably.
Right? I mean, a lot of the guys were teaching out of their garages and stuff back then, and to have a full-fledged studio, there weren't any. Maybe some jiu-jitsu guys were teaching out of a karate studio or something like that, but there was only, I mean, less than probably a dozen guys out there teaching jiu-jitsu back then. It's pretty wild that he was at the inception of that.
Right? And he obviously he lived in California at the time, but I think he was looking to get back to Texas. I think Texas kind of fit him.
Yeah.
And that's when he moved to Dallas and they started Walker. And
Yeah.
so he asked Carlos Machado, like he set up a whole thing for him right on the Walker set, and obviously Eric trained there and everything, and that's kind of how Carlos got started in the Dallas area.
Did they ever use you guys as bad guys or anything on the set?
Yeah, I done some stunt work.
You were doing some stunt work with them? Oh, cool.
Well, I think I might have did like maybe 7 or 8 different episodes.
Oh, cool.
Now, if you blinked, you probably didn't see
What did
me.
they throw you through a window or
Yeah.
out of a car or something? Or
we'd be in a bar fight or whatever.
did you ever win the bar fight? Or
No.
You got beat every time,
every
man.
time.
Come on.
So-
They should have let you win at least one.
You would think, but it would be fun. I think he was just doing it to give us like an extra bump, because the money was pretty good.
Oh, good. So y'all got paid pretty well.
Right.
And it was fun to be on TV.
And I was getting paid for
stuntman.
Kickstart. So they'd fly us up there. We'd stay at the hotel, free meals. And I'm a kid. I'm 23,
Yeah.
24.
Yeah.
So I'm like, this is great.
This is great.
Yeah. I go, do my little scene in the morning. And he's like, okay, John, all right. And I'd fly home. And it was fun.
That's cool. How much time did it take to choreograph that stuff? Or was it like within 5 minutes, y'all kind of knew what you were doing?
We weren't in charge of doing the choreography of the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
We'd basically show up and they just tell us what our parts were going to be.
Yeah.
So,
And then,
he liked, working with Chuck, he likes more of the cowboy type fights. So not more the integral martial arts where you might have like a Jackie Chan
Right.
kind of thing. This was more you do the cowboy swing,
right, throw the haymaker,
That's right.
pull the knife.
That's right, and that's kind of more of his style, I think.
And so you get to set and they're like, this is what we're going to do. And you just rep it out once or twice and be able to do it? Or what, did you have to drill things for a while?
It depended. Sometimes we'd have to drill a little bit. I'd see producers or whatever, they'd get upset if takes didn't take on the first one because that's money to them.
Yeah.
So I would be getting nervous and I'd be like, oh my God, my part's next. And that guy just got yelled at, and it's embarrassing, so
Yeah.
I want to make sure that my part, does pretty good. So I'd be practicing on the side. And luckily I never really ran into,
You one take John? That's what they knew you as around then?
1 or 2.
and was Mr. Norris the one going, no, a little to the left. No, okay, do this. Was he the coaching you guys, or was there somebody else?
Yeah,
that was...
Both.
Both.
It would be both. It'd be like, hey, I want you to place this here. I'm going to snap this kick up. I'm going to bring it this way. We're going to twist this way. So, and he was real gentle. He was awesome.
Yeah.
It was Clarence.
Yeah.
Clarence Gilliard was the one that I seen him send people to the hospital. Like he would get, Mr. Norris was so, Chuck.
Is that Trevette?
Yes, Trevette.
Yes.
Yeah. But Chuck was so gentle.
Okay.
Like when he would, handle you, he'd throw you real gentle. Clarence, you're lucky if you didn't miss a tooth.
Really?
I seen him like take a 2x4 and break it over somebody's back, like send him to
jeez,
the hospital,
man.
like out.
Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah,
That's rough, dude.
really rough. And everyone, it's funny because when we'd all like huddle up and they were like, "You're attacking Chuck, you're attacking Clarence." If you got told you were attacking Clarence, you're like, "Oh my God, man!"
Oh,
just
man.
pray, just pray.
So it's kind of funny. If I can remember some of the storyline, he was kind of like the rookie in the
Clarence,
show, right?
that's right.
And Walker was the mentor, and it was sort of that way off camera too.
Yes. Yeah, Clarence was a great guy.
Yeah.
He was really a really, he passed.
I heard that, yeah.
Yeah. But he went on to be like a preacher after.
Did he
Walker.
really?
Mm-hmm.
So Chuck Norris rubbed off on him so much
I
he
guess
became a
so.
preacher, huh?
That's it. But yeah, he was a really nice man.
Wow.
Really believed in Kickstart, and he was a really nice guy.
Yeah, I mean that's another thing too. Everybody that runs across Kickstart and sees these kids, and I've seen multiple belt tests, multiple graduations, multiple demonstrations from these kids, and it is super impressive. I mean, the one thing I really like about the traditional martial arts compared to the jiu-jitsu is there's not much of an opportunity for kids in jiu-jitsu to go do like a demonstration. I mean, you can get creative, but the kata style of the traditional martial art is set up for these kids to learn a series of moves and then put on a performance that's pretty powerful, not just in their physical ability to do gymnastics and throw a high kick and do some fancy stuff or some weapon stuff, but also just in their character development and in their verbal skills, their delivery, their screaming, their yelling, their confidence, right?
You're bringing out so many points on why karate,
Right.
why it is successful.
Yeah.
Not everyone's going to be a fighter.
Yeah.
All these kids, they'd send me to the roughest schools they had, Frost. I'm telling you, every single kid. You send me into the roughest school, I'm like, okay, great, man. These guys, they're going to want to fight. As soon as some of these kids get hit one time, they're not about it. They're like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that again. However, karate has a lot of other things that you can be good at. So if maybe fighting's not your thing, you can be good at what they call kata, which is prearranged fight moves put together. If that's not your thing, maybe it's jump kicks, maybe it's self-defense, maybe it's joint locks, maybe so there's maybe it's hands punching. There's just so many different things that you can be good at if you don't like the combat part of it, where you're getting striked in the face.
Yes. And in jiu-jitsu, it's tough. There's not much of a plan B. You're getting choked if you're not good at it.
Love it.
Right. Well, for the crazy people like you, that's a fun thing to do, but not everybody is wired that way.
Frost, when I showed up the first day and I looked down the line, I was like, man, there's some nerds in here, man. It's about to be on. And when I tell you I got wrapped up and I didn't know what was happening to me, it was the most humbling, horrible experience. I was like, this nerd just kicked my butt, man.
Right. I've been doing martial arts for 30-something years, and this nerd just rolled me up.
Crazy. But that's what I enjoy about it, but I think I'm just different.
Well, I mean, I think that's, yeah. You know me. I mean, I love jiu-jitsu. I'm a jiu-jitsu nut, so I love it. And I don't think it's for everybody. I'd love for everybody to do it, but like to your point, if somebody, I mean, I hear people all the time, I don't want to roll around on a mat with a bunch of sweaty dudes dripping sweat in my mouth while, that sounds like a terrible thing, right? Mm-hmm. So like on the traditional arts, there's that opportunity, like you mentioned, for these kids to be successful in these other areas that helps build their confidence. What do you see as sort of the confidence builder? If there's a couple of areas that you see the kids, they come in, head down low, leave, varsity quarterback, shoulders back, right, in their being. What do you see in your program that helps transform kids like that?
Well, I tried to design it where even if you're not athletic, you can be very successful in the class or in the program. So we're heavily character education based also. So what I mean by that is we give out honor stripes. And all that is basically different colors of stripes on your belt. So you would be surprised on what these kids would do for a blue piece of tape that goes around their belt or a red one. And we hold the honor stripes in higher regards than we do the physical stripes.
Okay, so what's an example of an honor stripe or something they have to do to get one?
So basically, we send questionnaires out with the kids, a real quick one that they bring to their other classroom teachers. Are they passing their class? Do they answer yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am? Are they bringing their supplies? Just real simple. Mm-hmm. And when they bring it back and they have all the check marks, they can get their blue honor stripe.
Okay, got it.
And that sets them apart from the rest of the class. So they can be successful. They can be just as successful as someone that's really talented in the class.
A super athlete, but you're acknowledging kids for being good kids.
And it's not where their karate's bad, but they might not be an all-star.
Yeah.
But there's other things that they can do where they can get an A or a B in the class.
And I mean, there's a lot of argument that the off the mat stuff is probably more important than the on the mat stuff.
Definitely.
You know, teaching a kid, whether, like you said, manners, yes ma'am, no ma'am, and being that strong role model for these kids is probably more important than some kids' ability to, you know, throw a high kick or choke somebody unconscious or that
I
sort of
mean,
thing.
I don't think it's any different than what you guys do here at Elite. I just think that maybe we deal with different clientele.
Yeah.
But
In different age group. I
That's
mean,
right.
you guys are specifically these early teenage years.
That's right.
Yeah.
But, you know, to demonstrate it, you know, if a kid gets a black belt, great. I have a lot of self-pride and I want to develop, you know, good black belts, but that's just scratching the surface with us. So basically, we want to supply them with the tools that they need to be good citizens, to show them that, man, if you can go 3 or 4 years and attain your black belt after 4 years, shoot, you can go and do 4 years and get your bachelor's. You can go get your master's. You've shown that you have that type of discipline.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, you know, they start to realize that, like, man, I accomplished this.
Yeah.
You know, and that took me 4 years or 5 years of hard sweat and work, and, you know, and that'll apply.
They earn some wins and then start to relate themselves as somebody who can be successful, and
Absolutely.
they find success in that area. Sort of reminds me of the military a bit. You served. When did you go in the military? How long were you in there?
I was in the reserves. I was in the United States Marine Corps reserves. I went in right after boot camp. Right after graduation.
How old were you? So you're 18, 19 years old?
I was 19.
Okay, got it.
And I was in during Desert Storm.
Okay.
I never went overseas. My unit did. They left some of us back, but I really enjoyed the Marine Corps. I really liked the Marine Corps. And so my dad was actually a commander in the Navy. He put 35 years in the Navy.
Oh, wow.
And so naturally I wanted to join the Marine Corps. So, you know, it is Department of the Navy.
Yeah.
The men's department.
The men's department. No, I like that one.
But you know, I was at this crossroad where I was like, man, I'm in the reserves. I'm thinking about going active duty. And then I get this call from Texas saying, hey, you want to be part of a legacy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man.
And you're in the military for how long at this point?
2 years.
A couple years. Okay, got it.
So I was like, man, I like the Marine Corps,
Yeah.
but my love is martial arts.
Yeah.
So I followed what my heart wanted me to do.
Now, you had already been training martial arts for, I think, 10 or 12 years by the time you were in the Marine Corps. Did it help you at all getting through boot camp or anything with your unit or anything?
Well, my dad I grew up strict Navy discipline. Like, there was no jacking around.
Yeah.
I mean, I jacked around, but
Yeah.
you know, he wouldn't allow that. But so mentally, I was okay because that's how he ran his household, and physically, I was okay just because, you know, I was training all the time anyway. So, and that's why I kind of liked it. I mean, you just see some guys that they just did not fit in.
Got it. So it wasn't that you knew some takedown that helped you when y'all were doing takedowns. It was that you had a disciplined lifestyle already, and you could get up early and make your bed and brush your teeth and
Yeah, I mean, and
work hard and sleep.
martial arts sets a pretty much a whole discipline, you know, system for you already. So it just kind of applied.
Yeah, super cool. All right, and then what, you know, nowadays, so Marine Corps, black belt under Chuck Norris, running Chuck Norris's organization, jumping your toe into, you know, jiu-jitsu for no other reason than to just learn something super hard. You know, how important do you think it is for people to constantly put themselves in challenges? I mean, we grew up, I was thinking about this the other day, you know, growing up here in Houston, you're just born into a situation where you really, I mean, 95% of the people don't have to worry about food, don't have to worry about water, don't have to worry about shelter. Like, yeah, some people are eating better food than others. Some people have a better house than others. But most of the folks here in this city and here in the U.S., you know, they might be worried about where they're going to sleep, but they can get a shelter overhead. I like to watch the show Alone. Do you ever watch this show?
I've seen it once, but not a regular.
So they drop these people off in the middle of nowhere, right? And they give them like 10 items, and they have to build their shelter, kill their food, boil their own water.
It's Naked and Afraid.
It's kind of. I haven't seen Naked and Afraid. I need to watch some of those, but sort of like that. But when these people catch a fish, they start crying. They're so happy. They're like, I haven't eaten in 6 days, and I just caught this, and this fish is this big. You and me would be like, throw that one back, you know. And they're like, they start crying. They're so damn happy, you know. And they're boiled. Today, it's snowing outside, and all I have time to do today is boil 2 quarts of water. Like, you know, and their level of gratitude and appreciation, they come off this show. Sometimes they're there for like 100 days. they come off this show totally transformed, and it's like, wow, like, yeah, there's life is rough for some people here. I don't want to diminish anybody's struggles, but for the most part, we don't have to worry about those types of things. So how important do you, or is it for you, to continue to push yourself and put yourself in tough spots?
I as far as martial arts is concerned,
Just anything in life, yeah.
I definitely like to do that with martial arts. Like, I think I'll be a lifetime martial artist. Like, you know, after jiu-jitsu, I'd still like to do some Filipino knife training. And
Yeah.
you know, I think I can do that when I'm a little bit older. It might not be as
Rough on the body.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, you know, and in fact, that's what drove me crazy about some of the instructors that work for me, is that, you know, they got stuck in this box and they don't try to grow. And I'm like, you know, and I feel like some people try to hide behind, you know, their belt and stuff. I'm like, man, put yourself out there, you know, grow, go do something, be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's a good point, right?
So
Setting yourself up, and it's okay to lose. It's okay to suck at something.
that's right.
When you start something new.
I mean, look at Michael Jordan. He missed probably more shots than he made, right?
Yeah.
So
And then goes and plays baseball.
that's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he wasn't afraid to look bad doing that. So I mean, I think it's important that you're putting yourself out there all the time.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things, you know, in my earlier years, in my 20s and 30s, when I was the most competitive in jiu-jitsu and MMA, winning and losing was important. Like, I didn't like to lose. I didn't lose much. I lost some. But then when I've gotten older, in my mid-40s, I took almost about 8 or 10 years off of competing, and then started competing again right about the time I turned 40, with a totally different mindset and intention around competing. Yes, I'm still out there trying to win. Anybody that I have a match with can tell that I'm trying to win and beat them. But that is the scoreboard. Win or loss is not the metric in which I'm measuring my success anymore. So it's like, you know, can I show up just in good enough physical health to do this tournament at 45 years old? You know, when I go to the Jiu-Jitsu World Championships, there's 80 other guys in my divisions. Half of them are on TRT, juiced. You know, like, can I survive this? You know, and if every year for the rest of my life, if I can show up to that tournament and win a few matches, do well, like, that's a pretty good, like, check in the box of just, like, re-upping my man card every year, staying in good health, right?
That's right.
And then the mental training I get from it too. You know, I was so much more nervous in my 40s than I was in my 20s or 30s. I'm literally in, you know, the largest convention center in the world, or one of them, in Las Vegas at this tournament, in some damn sweatpants and shoes, trying to sweat out a pound or two to make weight for this tournament. I'm 45 years old, you know, cutting weight, which I'm not doing anymore. You know, I'm going to fight heavier guys now, you know, like, you know, and I'm thinking, like, why in the hell am I here? You know, and all these thoughts go through my head. Why am I still doing that? You know, so you got to be able to, like, okay, hear all that noise, turn the volume off. Okay, why am I here? Okay, well, this is what I want to accomplish today, you know, and then, you know, overcome the noise in the head, overcome the physical. And I think that, you know, signing up, showing up, and you know, being successful mentally, being successful physically, and then cool, if you win a match or two, or your martial arts gets better, great. But I look at it more as, you know, like, I've got some friends that hike the Grand Canyon. They do the rim to the rim, or whatever it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a tough thing to put yourself through. And I think that always having those things ahead of you, I know I eat better, I sleep better, my relationships are better. There's just so much value in life to always having something challenging coming down the pipe.
You know, it's funny that you bring up competition, because for me, I just look at it a little different. I was that kid, karate wise, anyways, that competed like every month, and I competed from like the age of probably 8, and I think the last national tournament I did was 39. And when I got done with that tournament, I did well that tournament, but when I was done, I was done, and I was like, I was happy with it, and I've been at peace with just not having, you know, a competition for me personally, as far as going to a competition. I've been at peace with my competition career. I don't have a desire for the competitive ring anymore.
Well, it switches to daily.
Definitely.
Going to class.
That's
not
right.
that you're competing in that class, but that's the challenge.
That's right. And
Yeah.
that's what I was going to bring up. I'm
Yeah.
like, now it's just kind of switched for me. Now it's like, I'm competing in class. I'm, trying to stay disciplined. Don't miss class, give it 100%. Don't quit, and push. So it's just kind of switched for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. Fight or flight. I've heard you give a pretty good spiel on fight or flight before. What are your thoughts?
I feel like martial arts deals with fight or flight because kids fight when they're scared and they run when they're scared. And I believe martial arts instills that there are, into the child that there are other ways to figure things out.
So pause right there. So I have heard that term fight or flight since I was a kid, but I always just assumed you were either a tough guy and you fought or you were a wimp and you ran. That was how I interpreted it.
Right. And I can see how most people probably do interpret it just like that.
Right. Like there's you either fight or you flight. Like that's the only way to deal with, some intense situation. And that's incorrect.
I mean, we call it, verbal judo or whatever, being able to talk your way out of a situation or just, that you're confident because of your abilities of doing martial arts that, you stay calm during a situation and you find a way out.
So there's a third option. You don't have to fight and you don't have to run. You can stay in the conversation, remain calm, and find a solution.
I'll hit you with another finding here. It's been found from doctors that martial arts is a cross-lateral movement. So the left side of your brain works with the right side of your body and vice versa. And what doctors have proven is that helps with problem solving. So when you start talking about fight or flight, because they do martial arts, it being a cross-lateral move, it's helped them with being a problem solver also. So, and then another thing that, I know we're talking, fight or flight, but, martial arts deals with smacking that sense of self-entitlement right in the face. And that's what I love about the martial arts is nowadays I think everyone's thinking that they are owed a green belt because for whatever they showed up or whatever. And that's not true in martial arts. You got to check the boxes. Did you check this box? Did you do this? Did you meet this requirement? Okay, now you're up for it. So that's another thing that kind of sets martial arts apart from other sports. Do I think other sports are good? Absolutely. I like, football and basketball. I think they're great, but they're seasonal. And martial arts is a year-round thing. It's a constant reinforcement of what parents are trying to instill at their kids at home. So we work together with parents, instilling the same disciplines that they're wanting at home. So that's why I think martial arts is pretty powerful.
Wow. And what is it? What is it that inside, the techniques or the practice, is it the repetitions that help somebody come up with that third solution in that fight or flight situation? Do you think is it that, like I always talk about, people people always say, wow, what's it like being good at jiu-jitsu, knowing you can beat other people up? And I'm like, that's weird. I never think about that.
Right.
But like I think the value is I've had my ass kicked so many times. I know what that's like, and I've lived to tell about it, and it's really not that big a deal. And so you learn that, okay, having Eric on top of me, smashing me, there's probably nobody else in Houston that's going to do a better job of smashing me than him.
That's right.
You know what I mean? Like I've survived that. Like I can survive a lot of other stuff is sort of my philosophy. What are your thoughts?
No, I agree with you. I believe it gives you the confidence that you can survive anything that you need to. And I think it gives you the confidence that, hey, I can talk my way out of it. And if I need to, I can, defend myself. And, I feel like the confidence that martial arts will give a child will benefit them the rest of their lives.
And do you, in y'all's program, do you have anything that you teach the kids? Like, do you give them like talking points to or instructions on how to get out of a confrontation, or any tips for them? Or
we do what we call mat chats.
Okay.
And so basically at the end of the class, that's where the instructor is down on one knee and he's looking students eye to eye, which is a powerful thing. You're down on one knee with your mentor and you're talking about life.
You good?
And so, sometimes these are discussion points that they'll bring up. Even students will ask questions. Well, what if this? And so it's a discussion between the instructor and the students.
So it's more shoulder to shoulder, eye to eye, talking through their problems and having a mentor mentee relationship, giving people feedback
Yes.
that you value.
Yes.
And is there anything in the program like you mentioned verbal judo, like any kind of like de-escalation training or is it just through like the natural confidence that gets built through?
I think
program?
it's the natural confidence that comes from being a martial artist.
Yeah.
A lot of things. One thing that we didn't talk about is just keeping kids active. So they're not running around after school or in summers. We run an after school component, and because a lot of kids are just wanting to go hang at the corner, get involved with whatever a lot of the kids are getting involved with. This keeps them active and being productive after school. So we don't want to constantly just keep them doing something, whether it's tournaments on the weekend, whether it's after school throughout the week, or even before school. A lot of our guys do that too.
Yeah. And then anything, we were talking about coaches earlier and training the coaches. Anything, that you would say to someone that's been, teaching or training martial arts for a lot of years to continue to push them? What's your approach in coaching the coaches?
That's a great question because you can probably go in so many different directions.
Yeah, and I think this applies to anybody in any organization. So there's leaders in every organization, whether they're teachers or, on the executive team or whatever, and everybody needs to be poured into at times. So how do you do it?
So for me, I try to coach my coaches or teach my teachers, several different types of leadership styles, several different, which learners are you teaching to? So I do what we call see, hear, do. They got to see it, they got to hear it, and then they got to do it. And so when I'm teaching the instructors, we'll go through different scenarios on how you present materials.
Like what? What's an example?
So if we're doing a kick or whatever, I'm going to try to I have to try to create value into that kick. Like, this is why you do it. Make a scenario for kids, so that they're watching it, they're seeing what's going on. You're painting a picture for them. So they have to hear that. They got to see it, so you have to demonstrate it, and then eventually they're going to have to get up and do it. So that's why I say see, hear, do.
Oh, okay, got it.
So I'm sorry I didn't clarify
No, that was good. And then, so do you think, are there instructors that can talk too much and it's like, hey,
definitely
turn it off. You've been talking for 5 minutes about the same kick. Let these kids get up and try it.
Right. And so that's where we try to have a good balance with the see, hear, do. Another thing is, we try to work on the different leadership styles. So, you have a commanding style and you have a demanding style. The demanding style is, hey, do this because I told you to do it, which doesn't really get a good reaction. The commanding style is, hey, do this because I want this for you. And so that makes a student be a lot more receptive than did you just bark an order. So we try to work on that also.
That's pretty solid. And how long does it take to get a demanding coach into a commanding coach?
Right. So because when people come aboard, the old traditional karate is you're just barking orders. So that is a whole thing. What we try to do is staff someone a whole year in advance and train them throughout the year. Before we actually put our Chuck Norris stamp on them and send them into the field.
So it takes you about a year. You take someone who's got a black belt from a different system, they come over to your program, and you train them for about a year, and at the end of that year, they're pretty branded. They're on brand at that point.
They should be.
They should be.
That's the hope. When everyone comes aboard, when you interview, they're going to tell you what you want to hear. It's not till about 6 or 8 months down the road till you actually figure out, okay, this is what I got now. This is what I got to work with.
Yeah. There's a honeymoon phase.
That's right.
Okay.
But, a year is wishful thinking.
Yeah.
So, being a nonprofit, I can only staff so many at a time. I have a budget that I got to kind of watch. And if somebody quits on me or I have to fire somebody, sometimes people get moved into slots faster than I would like them to move into slots.
And how many coaches do you have roughly right now?
Probably about 70.
You got about 70 right now?
Right. So 60 programs.
Yeah.
So each instructor has a program, and then we have about 10 or 15 subs that are basically OJT, if you will.
On the job training, yeah. And then some area leaders and regional folks as well.
They'd be included into that 70.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then do you have any other best practices that you share with your coaches and how to coach these kids? I know I've heard you talk about pray. What is it?
Oh, and you got a good memory. You kind of threw me off there. So basically, we call it PCP, praise, correct, praise. So when you're working with kids, we try to coach, hey, that's really good, Johnny. But if you fix this, it'll be, but try to fix this. And then you leave them on a good note. Oh, that's what I'm talking about. There you go. Now you got it. So it's praise. Hey, good job. Fix this. And when you leave, so they start with a good initial contact with you. You get your critique in there. And then when you leave them on a positive also.
The compliment sandwich or whatever?
That's right.
Okay. So good job. I like the way you're doing that, and try it a little bit more this way. Yes, that's what I'm talking about.
There you go.
Give them a fist bump.
Right. Sometimes it's correct praise. I don't want to get, it's got to be PCP. Sometimes it's just correct praise, but yeah, I try to leave them on a good note.
So, okay, got it. So, just focus, leaving them on a good note versus what was sort of the old school way.
Fix this, do this, just the barking orders and, 10 push-ups, or.
Yeah. All right, everybody stop.
That's
push-ups.
Right. That's right.
Do you think there's value in the old school method as well?
I think there is value, but I just think kids are different now.
I agree. I think there's value too. I'm just thinking about like the old hard ass football coaches and things that I had. Like I remember those, and they're not everybody survives that.
No.
You run people off with that.
That's right.
And my thought now is, if there's a kid that does jiu-jitsu for 5 years versus that same kid that does jiu-jitsu for 5 months, like they're gonna be better in 5 years. Like if they stay in this program, even if I have to turn down the volume a little bit for this kid to survive this program, like I have made a bigger difference in that kid's life if he's been in this program for 5 years versus me being a hard ass and running him off in 5 days or 5 months.
You got to look at, you have overhead, and you got to look at your retention rate.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing that I do every year. So the 60 programs that I have, I'll go through all the numbers, and I'll be like, this is the number of students you started with, and you're at this number. I need to find out what happened to these kids right here.
Interesting.
Is it because, they moved out of the district, which it could happen. Is it because they're not liking your class?
Yeah.
So I try to make sure I dive down in there. Do I have a problem with this instructor now that I have to address?
Okay, so your average instructor has how many students they're teaching in a school year?
It depends. So
average,
I would say 150.
So there are 150 kids that one instructor is accountable for in their middle school. Mm-hmm. And then what would be a good retention rate at the end of that year? How many of those kids are still in the program?
I would say at least, because some of them are going to go to high school. So
sure.
I would say 100.
Okay. And then if somebody has 75, what's the conversation you have with them?
I would look at I have them fill out what we call a drop form sheet, and it lets me, and I compare the numbers that they started with, what they ended with, and there's every checkbox on why kids left, and I'll calculate those, and if it's like drop because they didn't like the class, then I know we have a teaching problem. So let me back up for a second. So even a drop form sheet, I mean, that's a term I've never heard before. And when I think most martial arts schools, they're not, running stats like the way you guys are. How did y'all get into, running the business by the numbers? Mm-hmm. How did that? Well, I mean, just like any martial arts school, I think retention is extremely important.
Yeah.
And it is for us too, because if a principal is seeing, a lot of kids go into a class, but half of them are like not liking it, or even more than half, we're going to get questions,
Yes.
So we try to be proactive with it and address the questions before they'll come up.
But at what point in the growth cycle of Kickstart Kids did y'all start getting sophisticated and organized around?
We did that from the beginning.
Okay, now whose idea was that?
Probably the director of operations before me. So and that was probably 30 years ago at this point.
And this was a guy that just happened to have been successful in other businesses and knew how to measure things, or was just wired that way? I mean, because that's not
Typical.
not easy to do.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not typical.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I never asked the question where it came from. I just knew it was a good tool, vehicle to use. So I kind of continued the practice.
Yeah. If you can measure it, you can move it.
That's right.
And so, all right. So y'all run a bunch of statistics on starting with the number of kids in the program, how many left, and if you have an instructor that's being unsuccessful at retaining kids, what's the conversation you have with them?
Right. That's where it gets kind of touchy, because I can't just let him flounder and we lose a program. So we'll put him on. We'll put him on a growth plan.
Okay.
So basically, that instructor will sit down with me and probably one of his regional leaders, and we will try to get to the root of the problem.
What are some common roots?
A lot of times, sometimes it's just personality. Sometimes it just doesn't work out. Sometimes I just have to say, hey, this is just not
This is not a good fit.
This not.
Because why? Like what type of personality or what would they be doing that wouldn't be a fit?
That's really a good question. I don't know if I can put my thumb on, the different personalities. Sometimes it might be where they're just too old school.
Okay.
A lot of times, a lot of the real traditional ways of teaching are not working as effectively as maybe what we call the layered method of instructing.
Okay.
And basically what that is kind of what your school teachers do, or they call it scaffolding. We call it layered method of teaching. And basically that's kind of like when you were in elementary school and your teacher was teaching you a word and they broke things down to syllables so that you could learn it from the simplest form.
Okay.
That's kind of how we do all of our martial arts move. We break it down so that maybe someone that probably is not athletic is going to at least get, be able to be a C in the class.
Okay. So would it be fair to say that the old school method, you exclude kids, and then this new school method, you're including the kids?
That's a pretty good
And so
synopsis
the instructors are just a little bit more like, hey, if you can't do this, sorry, hit the road. Like, they might not be saying those words, but that's sort of what's running in the background of these ones that are not successful.
I think so.
That's kind of a simple way to put it. I'm sure there's some
Or the old school coaching, as you were speaking earlier, where they just yelled and screamed, and you're in a public school right now, so the setting is a lot different than just an old school dojo.
Yeah, but even in an old school dojo, I mean,
you can't do that.
You're
not nowadays.
Miyagi and the Cobra Kai. I mean, the
Right.
Cobra Kai. It doesn't. I know I haven't seen the whole series on how things worked out, but they didn't end up with very many students by sweep the leg Johnny and all that stuff.
What's funny about Cobra Kai is, so he is a lifelong martial artist, and Danielson learned it for like 3 months and was able to win. I'm still trying to figure that out.
Trying to figure that one out. That's funny. Yeah. So, all right. So, just in general, whether you're teaching in a public school, or you're teaching out of your garage, or you're teaching at Elite, or you're teaching somewhere, it doesn't even have to be martial arts. But if you can be, inclusive and try to meet people where they're at and build them up versus, my way or the highway type of an approach. Barking the orders. It's just, in general, a better way to teach.
I think it's a better practice.
I do too. I often think about, I mean, I guess it depends on your goals. If you're trying to raise, somebody to, a Tiger Woods, a Michael Phelps, Michael Jordan, somebody to go win an Olympic gold medal, there might be some more benefit in just making it mentally and physically difficult for these people and giving them, screaming at them. I had some coaches that it was an ass chewing. I had this one coach who's so great. He was like, he'd tell me to make a correction, and I would say, yes sir, and then he'd tell me again, yes sir, yes sir, and then he would be like, and I wouldn't make the correction, and he would be like, if you say yes sir to me one more time, and I was like, okay, and then like the next day at practice, do this, okay, do this, okay. And then at the end of practice, why are you not saying yes, sir, to me? You know, it was such, it was just, but it was like, and you know, I survived all that and then ended up doing better in the competition. But there was also a lot of people that got run off, you know, and so, but I think the downside of that is, I mean, not to air everybody's issues, but you know, all those folks I named had areas of their life that were holes, and that you know Phelps is really, you know, was suicidal at one point, and now his whole life is about helping people overcome depression and that sort of thing. So I think there's sort of a dark side to pushing people that hard as well, that can show up.
I've actually kind of studied how your instructors instruct also, and there was a coach that you guys had at Westheimer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I want to say his name.
Okay.
But he was really rough. He was a high school teacher.
Okay.
You know who I'm talking about?
I think so.
Okay. He was a high school teacher. And when I would watch him at first, he was rough on the kids, the way he would talk. And after 6 months or so, I just saw him getting better and better. And me and this instructor would talk a lot. And I went up to him one time and I was like, man, you are really doing a good job with these kids, man. I've watched your growth over these last, 6 to 8 months. He was like, really? He's like, I've been working on it. I was like, man, 100%, dude. And so he really took it to heart and really was improving. He was the one that he was barking orders. And I was like, man, everything's doom and gloom, but he really turned it around. And, he said he was working with Coach Josh and Coach Eric, and just really improved. So,
well, okay, in the school districts themselves, I know you're not. I would call you like quasi involved with school stuff, like just basic education with kids. Is there regular teaching training, like math teachers, social studies? Do they get trained in praise, correct praise?
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of that happens for these teachers.
It's a yearly thing. So like once a month we have meetings
Through the school district?
No.
Not you. I'm talking about the math teacher. Do they? Is there any formal training for them?
I don't know. I don't think so. I really don't. I think they do in-services, but I'm not sure they're doing like clinics on different math presentations on how to present things better for math, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, or just an attitude of being inclusive versus exclusive with these kiddos.
I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. I actually wanted to approach the school districts because I thought it could be a money revenue source for us on presenting the Kickstart Kids way, and because they're always looking for in-services for their teachers to be able to teach better.
Oh, and they could pay you guys to come in and do the training.
That's right.
That's pretty smart. That'd be a good idea.
I'm like, if the regular price is this much, but we add on a 5 or 10, and we come once or twice a year to give these presentations to you, but we haven't done it yet. But
nice.
I've always thought about that.
Anything else on coaching the coaches? Any other tips or coaching the kiddos?
I think we've kind of hammered it, I think. Huh?
Nice. Well, what else you got coming up? I know I wanted to talk to you a little bit about overcoming injuries, and specifically one of the cons that I've seen in the traditional martial arts is a lot of people end up with a hip injury after being forced to do the splits, and as a kid, really people pushing down on the back. Like, what tips do you have to share with people to be able to avoid that sort of thing?
I think you just kind of nailed it. The way we trained back in the day, you're talking 40, 50 years ago, is just not conducive to, healthy outcomes. So, all those years of throwing the heavy bag and meeting it with a side kick, you get that bam of that impact, and then just the hardcore stretching that we did with, people pushing you down, and the Jean-Claude Van Damme, ropes on the ankles, stretching you out. We did so many crazy things. But now it's funny because I went to a tournament and they had a doctor there.
Okay.
And I was having a really hard time moving around. Like, I was like, man, I can't squat. I'm having a hard time. He was like, well, he's checking my range. And he's like, does that hurt? And I was like, oh yeah. He's like, yeah, you might be having some hip problems. I was like, really? Because I felt like I was relatively young for hip problems.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, yeah. He goes, well, look around this room. There's a room that had hundreds of black belts in there. He goes, I can bet you half of these people in here got fake hips on them.
Okay.
I was like, really? At this point, I'm starting to get spooked. So now I come back home and I went to get an x-ray and they were like, you're probably too young. You're going to be fine. No worries. I was like, okay, so I go do the x-ray and I bring the x-ray back to the doctor, and she's looking, I could see her face, and she's like, she was like, you are bone on bone. And I'm like, really? She was like, yeah, what have you been doing?
You got the hip of a 95-year-old.
Pretty much. And she was like, this isn't supposed to happen to you like, around 60 or in your 60s. And so I was kind of explaining, what I do. And she was like, yeah, so then I go see a specialist, and they're like, yeah, you're a candidate. And then this is on my left hip. They said, but you're really a candidate for both hips. But he said, but we go on pain. Are you feeling pain? I was like, no, on this one, yes, on my left. And he's like, okay. And I didn't want to do both. I was scared to death to do both at the same time.
Yeah.
Which now I'm wishing I did, just to get it done, because it's coming. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
But I was spooked.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God. And then I was dumb and watched a YouTube video on a hip replacement. Yeah. So I'm like, oh my God, they take this guy's leg off. I'm telling my mom, they took his leg off, Mom. And I'm like, they're going to take my leg off.
Take my leg off.
So I'm scared to death. And,
I got to go watch one of those now.
So for 4 years, I just took it.
You just dealt with it.
I was like, nah, man, they're not taking my leg, man. I'm thinking Civil War,
You're like, I can get through another few decades limping.
I knew it started getting bad with jiu-jitsu. And I'm going to tell you the move that I knew, because I was like, when I first started, I was like, okay, S mount, boom, got it. All right, got this. And then it was like, what was that? And then it was where I would literally have to, when you put the hands on the solar plex or chest, I'd literally have to bench press and like push myself.
Pommel horse. Yeah.
Like I have to push to where my butt would get up in the air so I could turn and come down.
Yeah.
Because if I didn't, the bone would just rub on bone. It was painful. And but it got to the point where, it was just unbearable. I couldn't squat down to get in a chair or anything. So I was like, okay, I got to go do this. And so I'm with the doctor. I was like, well, what are you going to do? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to make a cut here, and we're going to cut here, and we're going to take this rod, and we're going to hammer it down your thigh. And I was like, I'm sitting there, and I'm looking at my mom. And she's already knowing that I'm wigged out.
Yes.
So basically, they send this rod down your thigh, and you have to wait before you can come back. So you got to make sure that the bone forms around this rod real good and real strong. And if you come back like too early, like I wanted to come back after 3 months, and he was like, no, because if you move wrong, that rod will break through your femur of your thigh, and then you'll really be in trouble.
That does not sound good.
No. So I stayed out of jiu-jitsu for probably a good 4.5 months before I started coming back real slow.
Yeah.
But now it's just a matter of time from my other side. But now I got confidence. I'm like, okay, I survived, them taking off this leg. I think I can.
So was it a game changer in quality of life?
I believe so. I wouldn't say I have the range of motion I did when I had my normal hip.
Yeah.
But it's so much better. I'm not constantly in pain. I'm not constantly just like, not being able to move. I still even have trying to pull my knee up. I can still feel a little giddy up in it. And I just think that because when they cut a lot of muscle and, just taking time to kind of grow back together still.
Wow. All right.
But, hips, knees for karate guys are the worst.
Really?
And even the doctors are telling me knees, you're out for a good year probably over knee replacements. And then with the hip, that was 3-4 months, and I could come back doing things. So,
well, what advice do you have for younger folks doing martial arts to not have to have a hip replacement in their 50s?
Yeah. Definitely the hardcore stretching.
Cut it out.
I think you still need to be kind of flexible, but I don't think you go to where you're in pain.
Okay.
We would go to where more, in pain. It was ridiculous. But you still have to be flexible. But so I think you warm up more than you stretch. I think it's a combination versus just cold stretching and, just going, bananas with it. I think that's probably the bulk of things, but because I don't think you can get around doing a lot of things like kicking the pads and all that. I mean, that's
Yeah, that's part of the. Yeah, you
yeah,
got to train
you're gonna have to train.
and just try to keep it low impact.
Yes.
Don't overdo
Yeah.
stuff.
And I heard shoulders, shoulders and knees, that those are even worse than the hip. So, luckily for me, I haven't had knees or shoulders going bad on me.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
I'm sure it's a matter of time, but right now I'm fine.
Well, you said "Giddy Up" a second ago, and it made me think of your theme song, "Country Boy Can Survive."
Okay.
You got any hunting and fishing plans? Anything in the hopper?
This year I own a little place out in Palestine, Texas. It's nothing spectacular. It's a little 15-acre plot. I built a cabin on it. Well, I had a cabin built. And I've killed deer out there every year. Some nice deer. I think this year I shot 4 deer and 3 hogs.
Nice,
so
man.
just filling up the freezer, and it's just kind of my getaway. I'm the type that I know some of the guys that they'll do karate all day, all night, or martial arts.
Yeah.
On the weekends, they're going to the tournaments. I'm not built like that.
Yeah.
I need my time away.
Yeah.
I need to not think about martial arts or karate or whatever. I need that time so that when I do come back to it, I'm fresh and I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
So, and some people aren't like that. Some people can just do it, and not need the outlet. I need the other outlet.
I'm with you. I got to unplug.
Yeah.
I got to not think about whatever it is.
But that way, when I come back, it's like it's fresh to me now. I'm like, okay, yeah, now I'm back in here. Yeah.
Is it when you come back sometimes after a little time off, are you like, oh man, do you feel kind of fish out of water, or is it you jump right back in?
It's funny that you say that, because there has been times where the longer I've stayed out of jiu-jitsu, the lazier I got. Like, I can miss another day, Like it's been kind of comfortable not like being in pain or, getting twisted up. But then once I come back and I get class 1 under me, I'm like, no, I'm back in the grind now. This is great. I'm, back in it now. So it's kind of a mixed thing for me.
Yeah. Got to be like Maverick getting back in the airplane after Goose dies. You know, you just got to get in there and do it.
And I'm not crazy that you bring up that Val Kilmer.
I know, right?
Yeah.
My father-in-law and his buddies, the expression "I'm your Huckleberry" is a big thing. So we got him a Val Kilmer autograph for his birthday one year, with a cool picture. And I called him yesterday. I said, "Man, did you hear the news? Your autograph just went up in value." And it was kind of a bad joke.
Yeah,
but
I get it.
But anyway, yeah. I mean, what a stud, man! I loved watching.
My daughter
his movies.
came to me because it was on the news, and she was like, "Oh my God, Pops! I was I was such a crush on him when I was a kid.
Oh, really?
No one knew it, but oh my goodness, So now she can tell me she's older, but
That's funny.
yeah.
What a stud. Okay, so the hunting and the fishing, you're unplugging, and that's something you did with your dad as a kid that you got into, or?
Yeah, I grew up in Virginia, and it's it's a big naval town, but it's right on the Atlantic coast, and that's one thing that me and Dad would do is, we'd fish, and during the winter months we'd hunt, and there wasn't a lot to do there, aside of the beach, because it was such a small town.
Yeah.
And it's funny because when I came to Texas, when they called me, they were like, yeah, you'll feel like you're right at home. There's a beach there in Galveston and everything. I was like, oh, great. Okay. So I show up, I go down to Galveston, and I'm looking around. I'm like, nah, this is not Virginia Beach. This is not. This is mud. This is not even sand.
What are you trying to say, man? What are you trying to say?
I'm sorry. I lived in Galveston for 6 years.
Did
too.
you really?
I did.
That was your first station?
That was my first station. And, I liked Galveston. I loved my job more than anything. But after a while, I had to get out of Galveston. Now it's changed now, but then it was just so depressing.
Really?
It was just like ghetto everywhere and prostitutes. And
Really?
Frost. I'm telling you, I lived on 37th Street, and my school was on 31st Street. So and the school that I was at was 2,000 kids in the school.
Wow.
Really low. Social. I mean, it was
rough.
Very rough.
Yeah.
Very rough. And I loved the job, but man, I would drive to work and I'd see prostitutes everywhere, drug dealing going everywhere, gang banging here, and after years of that, it just wore me out where I was just like, man, I can't take this anymore. Like,
Yeah.
I need to come out, move to Texas City, you know. And then, and I don't know if you knew this, but they opened some Kickstart schools, and Chuck opened some Kickstart schools in Chicago.
Okay.
And they asked me to go run those for him.
Mm-hmm.
So I was so sick of Galveston that I was like, I'll go do it, you know. And so I went up to Chicago, which I didn't really like Illinois that much.
Okay.
It was just way too cold for me.
Nah.
And I didn't live in Chicago. I kind of lived in a suburb. But what was nice about Chicago is I'd get on the train and I'd, you know, shoot right in. I didn't really have to drive anywhere.
Okay.
But the cold was just unbearable.
Okay.
So, and out in my school, I had like, I think half the kids were Puerto Rican and half the kids were Mexican. That was the makeup of the school.
In Chicago.
In Chicago.
That's wild.
And they couldn't stand each other.
Oh, really?
They hated each other.
So fights and stuff all the
And
time.
they would ask me, I would get involved. They would ask me like, you know, a simple thing, boxing match. Who do you think is going to win, De La Hoya or Trinidad? Well, I think De La Hoya is going to win. You always root for those Mexicans, da da da. And I have to hear that whole thing. They just fight each other all the time. So,
Did y'all, when y'all launched these programs in those schools, did situations get better?
I would like to think that we built a good community in the school. I don't, you know, necessarily think like every single, you know, all 2,000 kids we're going to change. But I think we made a community for in a safe haven, if you will, for a lot of the kids.
For those kind of 150 kids and some of their inner circle.
That's right.
Yeah. So
And, you know, even like when I was at Central, obviously I'd have 150 kids, but it was pretty much an African-American school.
Yeah.
And they always respected the karate instructor there. Not necessarily me. It would probably be anybody. But
Yeah.
So my point being is even the kids that weren't in my class were always really cool to me. Like, you know, hey, what's up, coach? You know, this and that, because they respected.
they respected you versus some of the other people that they weren't respecting on
That's
campus. Right. Interesting. Okay. And why did Mr. Norris want to, most of the schools you guys are in, you started with, you know, low income, kids that needed the most help, at risk. Why did he go that route?
Well, and I don't know if you know this, Frost. I'm sure you do, being our board member, but our name is really called Kick Drugs Out of America.
That was the original name.
That's the original name.
Okay.
And the reason that we were called that is in the early 90s, if you remember Houston then, it was just a lot of gangs. And
and you had the war on drugs and all that
That's
stuff.
right.
Yeah.
And so basically when we started, it was, you know, we were an anti-gang, anti-drug program.
A gang against other gangs.
Kind of, I guess, right?
Yeah.
In fact, I remember Black Belt Magazine had
Okay.
a picture of Norris up there doing a front kick. And
Okay.
It was a perfect front kick. And that sounded like Trump. The perfect front
Perfect.
kick.
The best ever.
That's right.
Got a lot of friends.
So he's doing this perfect front kick, and underneath it says, you know, Norris 1, drugs 0. And then we were talking about Kickstart. But we were Kick Drugs Out of America. And then we went to what we call Kickstart. That's
Okay.
what we were. Kickstart. We were like, well, I think we're more of a character education program, so we're Kickstart.
Okay.
Then it went to, well, no one knows we're dealing with kids because we don't have kids. Now we're Kickstart Kids.
Got it.
So what's the original?
Yeah. So why the at-risk kids?
Oh, yeah, just because that was so prevalent. And the idea was to show what a good martial arts program can do for, you know, a kid that maybe is not have access to as many things as another kid would have.
Did he grow up in an at-risk situation?
Yeah, he grew up in a single family home. His mother basically raised 3 boys in rural Oklahoma.
Single parent.
Single parent.
So no dad, father figure in the house.
He had a father figure, but his father was an alcoholic and a womanizer. So
Okay.
basically, he wasn't in the home. So consequently, he grew up very insecure
Okay.
because he didn't have the father in the household. So, you know, and he was non-athletic at the time. It wasn't until he joined the Air Force and got stationed in Korea where he joined a martial arts class and he realized what martial arts kind of did for him. It, you know, gave him this confidence. So and a lot of people don't know this either, that, you know, Chuck Norris failed his first black belt test.
So he didn't even start martial arts till he was 18, 19?
He started training because back then judo was popular in America,
Okay.
but karate really wasn't.
Right.
So what happened to him is when he got stationed over in Korea, he had a broken arm,
Okay.
so he couldn't do judo anymore.
Okay.
But he was walking and he looked over this hill and he saw all these heads bobbing up and down. And he looked down and there was all these Koreans doing all these crazy kicks. And he was like, well, man, my arm's broke, but I think I can do that. And he went down there and joined the class and, goes up through the ranks. He fails his first black belt test. So basically he said, man, it was like 30 degrees outside. They were barefoot and they were all sitting down. There was like 50 of them. And it was his turn to come up and do what they call katas, which are the prearranged moves.
Yeah.
And he gets up there, he said he forgot everything. And so they failed him. And so obviously through perseverance, he went back and, attained his black belt. But come to the United States, he started winning a bunch of championships and, obviously opened up some schools and were successful.
Yeah.
What a lot of people don't know is an actor by the name of Steve McQueen was one of his students.
Okay.
And so Steve McQueen helped him with acting lessons so that he can get started in his acting roles.
Steve McQueen coached Chuck Norris in acting.
He got him acting
lessons.
Yes.
To get him started.
Yeah, 'cause he went to Chuck and he was like, hey, well, why don't you try acting? And Chuck was like, no, I don't think acting's me.
Yeah.
And that was before, now you have a lot of action guys doing karate in movies, but that was before anyone really tried to do that.
There wasn't any of that
That's right.
in the films at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah, he and Bruce Lee were sort of the first two to do that, right?
Yes.
And they were friends.
Right. So, basically, Bruce was doing those chains. He was doing, I think it was Return of the Dragon.
Okay.
I think that's the one that the two of them are in. And at the time, Chuck was the champion of the world in karate. And Bruce wanted to beat him in a movie.
Okay.
So basically, he called Chuck and was like, "Hey, I want you to be in this movie with me. We're going to have the most epic fight scene that's ever been done." And so Chuck said, "Well, who gets to win?" He's like, "I am. I'm the star." So
I want you in the most epic fight scene, and I'm going to beat you in front of everybody.
that's right. But they did work out a lot, and they actually became really good friends. And I know Mr. Norris really respects Bruce Lee and his abilities and his teaching abilities and just his forethinking on things. And he says he was a beast working out and stuff.
Yeah.
So
he was basically the OG of MMA, really. I mean, he was the one.
For back then.
For back then.
Jeet Kune Do. Well, Chuck's system. He has his martial arts system is called the Chuck Norris system, and basically it's a collective of a lot of different styles.
Yeah.
He implemented a lot of elbows, eye strikes, leg kicks, takedown, jiu-jitsu. Like he believes in mixed martial arts pretty much.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I love it when people have an open mind and continue to evolve and add stuff. And if somebody comes out with something new, let's learn that too.
That's right.
If it works, let's plug it in.
That's it.
Yeah, that's cool. All right. So Mr. Norris had a rough upbringing, and that was sort of the forethought on like, hey, let me help some other kids that have a tough family situation like I did.
He was thinking, man, if karate could do this for me at this age, because he's 20 at this point,
right?
He's like, man, imagine if I had this when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And then he was like, well, what about all the other kids that were like me that didn't have money, that grew up poor? I mean, he was so poor that he basically had an outhouse. That's where they used their bath,room. He had an outhouse. Just trying to, paint a picture on,
his living situation.
That's right.
Yeah.
And he's like, man, if all these other kids that can't afford a good martial arts program, what if they could? How would this better, the communities and these kids' lives? And so that's what made him really want to do this.
That's cool. What a cool success story. Somebody, rough childhood, rough upbringing, finds success, goes to the military, gets some structure, finds some success in a sport, becomes really good at that, and then starts training some actors, get him into acting, becomes one of the top, action actors of his time. Ending, I guess, I don't know if Walker was the last thing he did, but probably one of the last things I remember more impactful. I know he's been in Expendables and all that stuff too, but that Walker character being someone very similar to him and the values that he personally has, being able to get those values out into culture and then backing it up in the school systems. I mean, that's pretty cool, multi-tier approach to making the world a better place.
And I don't know if you're familiar with Richard Norton. He's a pretty popular martial artist. He was in a bunch of movies. He just passed this last week, and this guy was in shape. And I know those guys were, almost like best friends. He's an Australian guy.
Okay.
I don't know if you know who
I saw that he
Okay.
passed. Yeah.
Yes. And, the only reason that I bring that up is those two became really good friends. They're around the same age, both phenoms at working out. And Richard used to come to our convention a lot and do a lot of seminars. He's really helped out as far as Kickstart also, just coming, talking to kids. And the martial arts community just seems to be like one big family.
Yeah, it really is. I love meeting other people that do martial arts and other styles of martial arts. Everybody's usually the good ones. Like when I first met you, there wasn't very much like, hey, sizing this guy up. It was just like, hey, man, what's up? Good to see you.
Right.
You're kind of instant friends and have a lot in common.
Yeah, that's one thing I like about jiu-jitsu too, is I don't feel like there's a lot. Well, I don't feel like it in class. We're buddies, we're teammates, and I don't feel a lot of sizing up is going on. We just train hard.
Yeah. Well, super cool. Well, anything else you want to cover before we wrap this up?
Is there something that we need to cover?
Well, I think I really appreciate you coming in and talking with us, and also being the kind of person that, your life, just like Mr. Norris, we were kind of joking with the pressure of carrying on his legacy, but I really see you doing that, through your programming, but not even just through your programming. That's just sort of who you are. So like, even when you're up here at Elite, you're looking where you can help out, whether it was when we moved one of our facilities, you're over there with, carrying the stuff out of the truck into the other truck. If there's something we ever need around coaching our coaches or, teaching a class or doing whatever, you're always, willing to help out. And it's good to know that there's people like you out there in the world continuing to do the good work out there. So
I appreciate that. And thanks for having me on too, and allowing me to kind of speak on behalf of Kickstart. And just to kind of recap, if you don't mind, we're having our gala April 26th. It'll be a great opportunity if you want to come out. It'll be an awesome martial arts show. Phenomenal dinner. It's at the Post Oak Hotel, which is a nice hotel. You have an opportunity to be a VIP, kind of, debrief with Mr. Norris a little bit, shake hands, take a photo.
Yep.
It should be a nice time. Our kids will be performing, and it's usually a nice night.
And if somebody listening to this wants to get their kids in a program or a program at their kids' school, can they reach out to you guys and say, hey, I'm at such and such middle school. What would it take to get a program going here?
Definitely. We and it's at the same website that you would go to for the gala. It's kickstartkids.org.
Okay.
And it has our emails on there. You can email us. We'll come out, do a presentation. We can kind of paint a picture on what this would look like inside their campus, and we'll take it from there.
Awesome. Well, rock on, buddy.
Yes, sir.
Well, thanks for coming.
Absolutely. It was great.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Bye, everybody.